Hello and welcome to another episode. I am Brian, the Unskilled Commander, and this is Deck Break It Down, where I take one of my decks, show you all the component parts on Moxfield, go over the ideas of why I tried to build it, what direction I was trying to take it in, whether I was successful or not. Well, that's up for debate, and you can let me know in the comments if you think it's successful or not. Today I thought I'd do something a little different. I'm going to show you a test deck. I haven't finished it in paper yet. I was lucky enough to get a bunch of Assassin's Creed Universes Beyond packs, and I happened to open a foil Arbaz Mirror. And I had played against it earlier the week before against friends on a stream, and it was fun. Whenever Arbaz or another non-token historical permanent enters the battlefield under your control, he deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. Pretty simple. It's a 2/2, not very strong. You're probably not going to be swinging with them. However, you could if you went in a Voltron route, where you're just giving him all the best equipments, beefing him up, because every time you play the equipment, you gain a life, everyone takes a damage, and now Arbaz is able to be more powerful. However, I decided to take it a different way. As I was looking through the cards I actually owned, I started to go through the artifacts, of course, and I was like, oh, sure, I put a bunch of equipment aside. My thought process originally was it's probably going to be pretty similar to everybody else's Arbaz deck, where it's just a bunch of red-white legendaries and a bunch of equipments, beef them up, go, swing. And of course, he doesn't deal with assassins, but the cards I got from Assassin's Creed Universes Beyond were a lot of assassins in the red-white. I'm like, oh, this will be fun. I'll just make assassin tokens and then equip them or whatever. But as I went through the equipment or the artifact section of my bulk, I started landing on the Myr. All these Myr are artifact creatures. Well, he says when a historic permanent enters the battlefield, not cast, when it enters the battlefield. And historic permanents, as you can see, are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Those are all historics. So any legendary creature I play, or legendary anything, those would all trigger him. I was like, what if I just load this deck up with mana rocks? That was my first thought. But then I hit the Mirror and I was like, well, wait a second, these are artifact creatures. What if I just made my entire deck a Myr deck like I originally had and tweak it into red and white? So that's where this one comes from. Let's get into the deck. So 28 creatures. That's a lot. Some of these might come out eventually and try and get some other things in. But we do have non-Myr creatures. We've got Alabu, Ancient Witness. Artifact creatures have haste. And whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alabu deals damage equal to the number of tapped artifacts you control. And you get to scry that many times. So not only do you get the X of the artifact creatures, but if you tapped whatever mana rocks you had out to help cast some of those creatures that now have haste, those tapped artifacts will also do it. So now not only is your commander pinging everybody when you play these artifacts, you tap them and swing with a bunch of artifact creatures, Alabu pings everybody again, and then they worry about combat damage. We've got Aya of Alexandria, 4/3 that has Menace and Lifelink, which is helpful, but whenever a historic creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you make a 1/1 black assassin creature token with Menace. That card might probably end up coming out at some point. I just liked it because I like to use cards from a new set when the new set comes out and I'm building a deck. She has nothing to really do with artifacts. It's just a 4-drop that does have Lifelink, which is awesome, and Menace, and can make little 1/1 with Menace. And that could, over time, be a threat to somebody. A bunch of 1/1 assassins with Menace. That's nothing to ignore. Next, we've got Bayek of Siwa, double striking 3/4. As long as it's your turn, other historic creatures you control have double strike, which means all the artifact creatures now have double strike, which is why he's in there. Bronze Guardian, it is an artifact creature, it's just not a mirror, and it has double strike, and it gives other artifacts ward too. So now you get him out, all of your artifact creatures are protected. Chief of the Foundry, other artifact creatures get +1/+1. Jumping backwards, we've got Alloy Myr, so taps for 1 mana of any color to help mana fix early in the game if you need it, or just have extra mana to play more spells, more artifacts, paying the table for more things. 2 fun includes that I dumped in from the Doctor Who deck. We've got Cyberman Patrol. Artifact creatures have Afflict 3, so if someone does block one of my artifact creatures, they immediately take 3 damage. And Cyberman Squadron. This is going to be the fun one if it ever gets to actually see the light of day and go off. Non-legendary artifact creatures have Myriad, which means whenever you attack with a creature, Myriad makes a copy of that creature tapped and attacking your other opponents. We've got Foundry Inspector, which makes artifact spells cost 1 less to cast, which is very helpful. Gold Mirror, another mana fixer one. Hover Mirror, something finally in the air, which is really important. Mycosynth Golem, so it's got an affinity for artifacts because it costs 11 mana for a 4/5. Pretty crazy. But if you have a couple artifacts out, it costs less. And then it gives artifact creatures spells you have affinity for artifacts. If you are able to get him out relatively early, that means you can start dumping the rest of your hand real fast with all of your artifact creatures. Mirror Battlesphere, pretty obvious inclusion. Mirror Convert, because it's toxic, that's cool. So poison counters are not a theme of the deck in any sense. But as you can see, it's just a whole bunch of mirror. Palladium Mirror I like because, of course, it taps for 2 colorless, which is important to help get things out faster. Here's the Plague Mirror, which actually has Infect versus Toxic. Steel Overseer is a really good one because you tap that creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature you control. So that should be your entire board state for the most part. And finally, the last creature I'm going to call out is from the Assassin's Creed set as well, the Capitoline Triad. This one might eventually come out. I got the card and it's cool, and I also got the token for it out of the packs. So I'm like, well, I kind of want to have it. It costs 1 less to cast for each artifact in your grave, well, each historic card in your graveyard. So if someone does board wipe, this is a great late game card, and I can exile all of those historic cards as long as they have a mana value 30 or greater, and I get an emblem which can't be interfered with that says creatures I control have base power and toughness 9/9. That would really be great if it was able to get going, but again, I have nothing in here that's going to make me sacrifice artifacts to get them into the graveyard to do that. So the likelihood that this will ever really properly function is very low. So like I said, it probably will come out of the deck sooner rather than later, but I like the idea of having it in there. Moving on to sorceries, nothing super special. I tried to focus on what little card draw I could get from reds. We got Wild Guess, Witch's Mark, Seize the Spoils, Monastery Raid, Cathartic Reunion, but I do have 2 really good board wipes, Organic Extinction and Soul Scour, which destroy all non-artifact creatures. So that should protect pretty much my entire board state while blowing up everyone else's. There's only 3 instants. We've got Path to Exile just because it's pretty common staple. I mean, you almost have to have it in every white deck. You don't really need it, but at the same time, it is good to just get rid of somebody's big bad creature that's really been a threat, or even their commander, and then more card draw with Thrill of Possibilities and Unexpected Windfall. Now we move on to the other giant section besides the creatures, which is the actual artifacts themselves. I loaded this up with just pretty much all of the freaking mana rocks. You got Arcane Signet, Bonder's Order, Coalition Relic, Commander Sphere, Darksteel Ignite, Prismatic Lens, Mana Geode, Grand Dynamo, Thought Vessel, Soul Ring, Sisay's Ring, Seer's Lantern. We also have some of the buffs. So Herald's Horn, Vanquisher's Banner. Herald's Horn isn't a buff, sorry, but it does make creature spells of the chosen type 1 less to cast, so that helps reduce the cost of all the mirror. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card. If it's a creature of that type, you put it right into your hand. So it's almost like extra card draw. As long as you happen to hit a mirror on the top, you draw it, and then you get to actually draw for your real turn. But Vanquisher's Banner gives creatures of the chosen type +1/+1. We've got Forsaken Monument, so that gives colorless creatures, which are all the mirror artifact creatures, +2/+2. And when you tap something like any of these mana rocks for a colorless, you get an additional one. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. So huge in this deck. We've got Cloud Key, which you choose upon casting it when it comes into play. Whether artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, whatever you choose, that type of spell becomes 1 less. So you just say artifact, that covers the creature aspect for the most part, and it even makes all of these mana rocks cheaper, so that's even an extra bonus. 2 other really good callouts, of course, are Panharmonicon. You gotta have that, because if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. Arbaz Mir is a triggered ability, and he's specifically off of historic permanents, which are artifacts. So you get him and Panharmonicon out, suddenly you're pinging everybody for 2, plus we've got Mystic Forge. You can look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may cast artifact spells and colorless spells from the top of your library. And you can even tap it and pay 1 life to exile the top card of your library. So in a pinch, you look at it and it's just a basic mountain or plains. You can pay a life, tap Mystic Forge, exile the land, and hope to heck you've got something better on top that you can actually cast. As I said earlier, we've got Sword of the Animus. Finally, some other callouts. We've got the Immortal Sun. So that just helps buff all of my creatures, +1/+1. Reduces the cost of all of my spells. I get to draw an extra card on my draw step. And as an added little bonus, players can't activate Planeswalker abilities, which I don't have any in this deck, so haha. And then finally, we tossed in the old Unwinding Clock. Untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. So I swing out with my guys. Maybe I do some damage, maybe I don't. But on the very next upkeep, I get to untap them, so it's almost like giving them vigilance. We've only got 3 enchantments right now. Tempered Steel. Artifact creatures you get +2/+2, of course. Really good buff for them. And True Conviction, really great. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. Axia's Welcome. Creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield. You can draw a card, but it only happens once per turn. And then finally, we've got 34 lands, down from my normal 36, because there's so many Rana rocks. I took the risk, and I'm taking the chance that's like, okay, let's drop it down by 2, because there's literally 15 to 20 mana rocks in the deck. All I need is 3 lands in my opening hand. That's enough to cast pretty much every mana rock in there, except for like Thran Dynamo and stuff. And as a little added bonus, we've got Ancient Den, Rustvale Bridge, and Great Furnace, which are artifact lands, so when they come in, you will also get to use the activated ability or the triggered ability of your commander and ping everybody, along with Abstergo Entertainment, because it's a legendary land. And Treasure Vault as well. It is an artifact land, so that will ping everybody. So there you go. This is my still relatively yet untested Baz Mir deck. What do you think? Think it has potential? What would you put in? What would you take out? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.